Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on? YouTube Middle Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Ferrum Forge Exec. A very, very slender, very cool, sort of, this makes me think kind of tactical gentleman's for sure. Really interested in this knife. This was sent to me by none other than the great Nick Shabazz. Thank you so much, Nick, for sending this guy along. He sent a whole bunch of stuff. Actually, he and I communicated about a bunch of different things over the course of, I think, weeks or months, and we finally were able to make a agreement on him sending me some stuff. But Nick was kind enough to kind of read out a bunch of interesting things that he had in his collection, and this is one of the things that I selected. So thank you very much, Nick. It seems kind of silly to suggest that if you're not subscribed to Nick Shabazz to go subscribe to him because everybody knows who he is. But if you're not subscribed, obviously, go subscribe. Thank you to all of my generous patrons for supporting me right now. If you'd like to check out my Patreon and get your hands on some of those cool stickers, there is, of course, a link down in the description. The support would mean the world to me. There will also be links for this guy right here. Let's go ahead and get a measurement. Overall length of the Ferrum Forge Exec coming in at, a nice crispy 8 inches overall. Tip to scale coming in at exactly 3.5, and blade length coming in just shy of 3.5, 3.3, 3.4 inches, something like that overall. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. So you can see there we're looking at basically the exact same length overall as the Benchmade Griptilian. It's just much more slender. And then last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 is coming in at 7.25 inches overall. How's the action on this guy? Well, I'm pretty sure that these are made by WE. It seems like Ferrum Forge has a good relationship with WE knives. So these are not made in the United States, but it's very reminiscent of a WE knife. Very, very smooth. It takes just a slightly more than, I mean, it almost acts like it wants to be drop shut, but it's incredibly smooth. And also, the profile and the flipper tab, despite being so slender, really create for a pleasant experience flipping this. I was like, I'm going to get that thing in hand and I'm going to be like, there's not enough room to get my hands on there. And the flipper tab looks tiny. No, actually, in true Ferrum Forge fashion, say that 10 times fast, the flipper tab and the weight of the blade, mass of the blade, right, the profile, all of that has been thought through, and they have managed to achieve a very aesthetically pleasing profile, at least in my opinion, and at the same time a convenient and responsive flipping action. So yeah, that is wonderful. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check on this guy. Get out my handy dandy WIA magnetic driver and WIA bit selector, two items that are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them down in the Amazon store that I reference at the beginning of every single video. That looks like a T. It looks like it might actually be a T10 pivot. We're going to give it a shot here, but I could be wrong. Am I? Yeah, I'm wrong. Okay, sorry guys. It probably means that I was hopeful that it was T10 and T8, but it looks like it's going to be T8 and T6. Let's give that a shot. And yeah, pivot is definitely T8, and it looks like the rest of the screws are going to be T6, which is, I think, the case on a lot of Ferrum Forge knives. Go ahead and try that. Lock bar insert screw, and the pocket clip screws, yes. And of course the scale screw, and yes, that is T6. Okay, you guys have heard me say a million times, I personally don't like T6, but as long as you're careful, it shouldn't be a problem if you have to take the knife apart. It is never a deal breaker. It's never something that should stop you from buying a knife. It's just something that I don't like. But that's fine. On the plus side, it's very minimal hardware. You can see that there's nothing on the other side. The hardware is really just on one side, and then there's a show side captive end of the pivot, which is just, the presentation side of this knife is so Wonderful. I love this. We're going to talk more about that here in a sec. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see there it's at maximum exactly the same thickness, possibly a little bit more slender. Let's do carry profile this way. So up against the Spyderco Para 3 and PM2, two knives that have awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about. You can see that this is just an absolute winner. Despite the fact that it has a flipper tab, it's nowhere near as tall as either of these knives, and it's only slightly longer than the Para 3, which is interesting. I mean, it looks like such a tall, long blade, but now this is very, very pocket friendly. In fact, Ferrum forged knives in general tend to be very pocket friendly, very user oriented, but at the same time, right, they have a wonderful aesthetic usually. And their flipping action is just amazing. So in some ways, this is more the same from Ferrum Forge, but it is pretty unique. I mean, like, despite being kind of aesthetically simple, it is very, very unique. All right, have we gone over everything? I think we have. Let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy of this guy. So we've got titanium, tumbled titanium, and it is nicely rounded off all the way around the outside. We have a carbon fiber inlay here that really looks great and is kind of almost, I mean, it kind of follows the lines of everything. It follows the pivot, things like that. Upon closer inspection, I'm seeing there's just a couple of weird gaps in there. And I mean, that's not something that I'm like overjoyed to see. It's definitely nowhere near the worst inlay work that I've ever seen. I think it's okay. It doesn't bother me that much, but you know, over time, little teeny tiny pieces of debris will probably get stuck, probably right here in this area. It's not that big of a deal. Basically, to the touch, it feels very even, but to the eye, under this light, right? So we've got more gap up here, and then straight, more gap down here, and then it comes back. So yeah, it's one of those little things where, you know, some people are going to be super bothered by it. Just laying here and looking at it in my light and not through the camera where everything has been adjusted to give maximum definition, it doesn't look like anything. I mean, like it looks like everything is perfectly even, right? So it's probably one of those things where if you get one out of the box and you see it, you're going to be like, that's mildly annoying. And then over time, you're going to go, I don't care, because it doesn't change how the knife functions or anything like that. But considering this is an expensive knife, yeah, I'd kind of like to see the inlays done perfectly. And that's a little bit odd, you know, for Wii knives, but not a deal breaker. Moving on here, check out the pivot. The Ferrum Forge pivot, this end is the captive end, and then we have the adjustment side over here, and that is just wonderful. That's all the billboarding they decided to do on this knife, other than it says the blade steel right over there, but that's awesome, right? I mean, like, they get it. We know what we're buying. We're buying a Ferrum Forge Exec, right? So they just put their logo on it. They're like, here you go. It's a knife now, you know? That's great. Let's take a look at the blade. Blade is satin finished CPM 20 CV, like you guys can see right there. And then we have a nice drop point blade. Spine thickness, I just realized we didn't weigh it. We'll go ahead and do that right now. So thickness on the spine is coming in at about 125 thousandths. And I believe on the inside, we don't have really any well, let's take a look here. Yeah. There's no excess milling on the inside, but it's not a very, you know, it's for the size of knife that it is, it doesn't have a lot of excess material. So overall weight on this guy is coming in at, wow, 3.35 ounces. Yeah, I'm good with that, no problem. You're getting a lot of blade for the weight on this guy, and you're getting a very balanced knife as well. The knife is balanced right there in that choil, right where your finger goes, so picking this up, and it feels even lighter, honestly, which is crazy considering how big of a knife that it is. So that's really cool. Really, really like that. The blade does come down to a pretty reasonable cutting edge. It's not, you know, like absolutely freaking laser beam thin, but it is pretty darn thin. I mean, your EDC tasks in general are absolutely going to be tackled with efficiency with this guy. You've got a nice long blade, so if you have some puncture tasks and you get in and cut, right, it's great. There's nothing in the cutting path, so you get to make use of all of that blade. The flat is carried out, seems to be about 55% or so. But yeah, there is a nice amount of thickness carried out to the tip, so I wouldn't call this a delicate blade by any means. I mean, that blade is really kind of good to go for a lot of different EDC style tasks. And honestly, I mean, even if you're out hiking or camping or anything like that, this is just going to be a great blade. The main thing is that you're getting a lot of usable cutting edge in a very compact, easy to carry package, and that's great. The edge is done nicely. No wonkiness or imperfections, anything like that. This is kind of the satin finish that you see on like everything from Ferrum Forge and everything from We. Truthfully, it's kind of a satin finish that I'm bored with. It's kind of, it doesn't really have like the uniform grind lines that, you see on like a satin finish on a ZT or some of these other brands. But it's not quite tumbled either. It is reflective. It's okay. I just see this finish on everything. And whenever I say I'm tired of the satin finish, this is the satin finish I'm tired of. I see it on so many knives. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying it's an ugly finish. It's just like, I see it all the time. Every Ferrum Forge knife specifically, it's got this exact same finish. But that's a personal thing, so whatever. Moving on here, like I said, there's no hardware showing on this side. That is pretty cool. That makes the front part of this knife look great. On top of that, this is actually a different category, but ergonomically, yeah, you'd think, how comfortable could basically a big straight line be, But yeah, it is, and it's because of this excess chamfering right here. It almost feels like contouring, and everything just kind of melts into your finger. There's really not an uncomfortable spot on this knife, and there's so much room on the handle. You actually have a little bit of room to move around. I wear about an XL size glove, so I don't have the biggest hands in the world, slightly bigger than average, and I can tell you, yeah, this is comfortable, and I can lock in pretty well, right? There's no real stop down here to stop you from slipping off the knife this way, but I feel pretty locked in. No jimping up top, but I don't know that it really needs it. What I do like is that everything's knocked down up here, so these aren't sharp, despite this being a satin finished blade, and me kind of expecting them to be sharp on a satin finished blade. Let's move over to the other side. Wonderfully simple, wonderfully simple. We've got the steel lock bar screw, we've got 2 screws for the pocket clip, and we've got a screw back here that's just kind of holding these 2 pieces together. You can see there's no backspacer, it's just a seam back here. Normally, I'm like, I kind of want a backspacer, but I really like the idea of simplicity with this guy. And so the design also allows them to put it together with just a few screws. And that's all that's really necessary, right? It's got all the structural integrity that it needs. We've got 2 big pieces of titanium meeting up back here, right? So they've eliminated the extra part that would be the backspacer, and at the same time, they've eliminated the need for excess hardware, which makes it easier to take apart, even though they're T6 screws. I like that. I think that's cool. I appreciate that. So I don't have a problem with it, and it feels incredibly solid, right? That's great. There is a steel lock bar insert doubling as the over travel stop. This particular one coming in at, looks like it's locking up at, it's like exactly 50%, which is great. No blade play, up, down, left, or right. And the blade is perfectly centered. Now this came from Nick Shabazz. I don't know if he tweaked it after he took it apart. If it was a brand that was different from what I expect from companies like Ferrum Forge is pretty good about their centering. They're pretty good about their action, things like that. So even if Nick did take this apart and lube it up and do his thing, right? I'd expect everything from him to come with just absolutely perfect action and centered and all that. But Ferrum Forge does a great job with that. So that's what I'm trying to say, is expect it to feel very similar to how I'm describing it here, which is very smooth, very pleasing, just excellent. So we're actually at the end of the review here, and I'm at 13 minutes, under 15 minutes. Maybe I should monologue for a little bit. I'm not really sure what to do here. I don't normally finish a knife review this quickly. Little nitpicks. What can I nitpick about this knife? Well, something we didn't really talk about, I suppose. The pocket clip is great in terms of function and how it looks. It's wonderful. It goes right along with the design, right? It's going to hang onto your pants. It's going to easily slip over things. There's not much of a bill, so I wouldn't worry too much about it snagging. It's also titanium, which means even if it does snag, it's going to be forgiving. It carries a little bit shallow. I don't want to say it's overly shallow, right? I kind of wish they just moved it up a little bit or gave it a true deep carry, like this big chunk up here. Why not mill a space into the titanium and just use one screw, right? And then this whole, you could move that up, or this area could be cut out about 1/4 of an inch, and honestly, it would carry just deep enough to where I'd go, yeah, that's just right? That's just right. But, yeah, how complaint worthy is that, right? The knife carries excellent. I mean, like, that should not be a reason not to pick this up. I want to point it out, but I don't want to really emphasize it. It's got T6 screws. Some of the inlay work is just a little bit off, right? That's about it. That's about all I can complain about there. This is going to be a little bit big for some people. It's probably not going to be legal for some people in certain areas, right? But for everybody else, you're going to be just fine. Just about sliced my finger, wiping those fingerprints off. This is an excellent knife. The knife comes in at about $260. It's not a price that blows me away, but I can completely understand how they got here. We do have carbon fiber that's inlaid, it has been laid into the titanium, so they milled that out. Nicely tumbled, nicely chamfered. There's a lot of nice little design elements that really make a lot of sense here. It's got a nice satin finished blade, right? There's not a lot of complexity that goes into it at first glance, and then you realize that it was all, designed, trying to keep things simple, trying to keep things, functional and elegant at the same time, and they did manage to do that. But we are looking at CPM 20CV, titanium, and carbon fiber in a package that makes a lot of sense. This is a wonderful EDC knife. An absolutely wonderful EDC knife. Somebody looking for something straightforward, gentlemanly, right? But at the same time, extremely functional in a wide variety of settings, right? I mean, go to church, the office, camping, right? I mean, this is, it's very versatile, absolutely. I'm a big fan of this for a lot of reasons. I can absolutely recommend this knife. Like I said, there will be links down in the description so you guys can check this out. Hopefully yours doesn't have the same kind of wonkiness with the inlays, but it does come in a few different colors, few different forms. But yeah, check it out. Absolutely. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's knife review. Somehow we managed to stay under 20 minutes. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.